Hey everybody, this is Virginia with 13 Design. Thanks so much for joining me here today for episode 6 of our Stick It series. And this is our basic decoupage tutorials. And today I've got a really good one. Okay, so today we are going to focus on furniture. And normally I would decoupage on a piece I already have and kind of upcycle it. I didn't really have anything that was small enough to kind of fit in my studio here and show you, so I'm actually going to make a piece of furniture. So this is going to be a two-part series to show you guys how to take just a plain old piece of wood and make it into a piece of furniture, in this case a little table. And in all fairness, I'm not upcycling, but I've had this piece of wood, and I'll show you here, I've had this piece of wood in my garage for quite some time. So essentially, I didn't buy anything, right? So I've got a big old thick piece of wood, and it's going to be perfect for a small tabletop. So that's what we're going to use for today's decoupage. Also, we're of course going to have to paint it, so I'm going to use some chalk paint to paint the top because I don't want any bleed through or anything like that. And was also going to assist us in not having any bleed through, because if you see here, there are some knots, and they will bleed through our decoupage if we don't seal them off. So the decoupage that we are using today is this Polyvine, and it is the Heavy Duty Varnish, okay? And this is really good if you're doing furniture or someplace that's going to have a lot of wear and tear. It's a really nice heavy duty varnish. This also will go down before our decoupage and kind of seal up these knots in the wood and keep it from the tannins from bleeding through. So it's like a double part, right? But it's worth a little bit extra money to make sure that your project is going to last, right? If you're going through the trouble of doing it, you might as well make sure that the project is going to last. And then of course, I'm using one of my 13 Design decoupage papers. This particular one, let me roll back, is our extra large poster size. And I'm going to use one of them girls because I just love this with the boots, right? So that is the decoupage that we're going to be using. And the technique I'm going to use is a wet on wet because the Polyvine varnish is pretty watery. I don't know if you can hear it, right? It's not a thick varnish like some of the ones that we've used in the past here. So I'm going to use the wet on wet because I think that will complement this varnish really, really well. So let's get started and let's make a mess. So first things first, we want to make sure that our surface is nice and clean. So if it's dusty from being in the garage, dust it off. If it's a piece of furniture you're going to upcycle, you're going to use a cleaner that will get rid of any sheen or shine so that your decoupage paper will adhere properly. We are going to block these knot holes so that the tannins don't show through our decoupage paper as well. So we're going to get out our decoupage paper, and you do have some options. Do you remember this? If you don't paint the surface or the back side of your decoupage paper, your colors are going to end up being a little bit more muted, like this side. And that's fine if that's the look you're going for. Or you can paint the back side of your decoupage paper white or lighter color, or the surface, and you're going to get much more bright colors, which are the intended colors of the design, but it's either is totally fine. It just depends on the look that you're going for. For ours, I'm actually going to use cream colored paint, which is a nice compromise between the two. So my colors will be bright, but slightly muted. Okay, so we know that our paper is going to fit on our form. So we're going to put that aside. And I'm going to spray down the surface. Chalk paint tends to be thicker, at least this brand does. And so I want to kind of thin it a little, and I'm just going to do that by spraying the surface with my handy dandy squirt bottle. If you don't have a handy dandy squirt bottle, you can use a damp paper towel to get your surface just a little damp. So this also allows for the paint to really soak into this raw wood surface, right? So I'm just going to squeeze the paint all over the top here. You can put it in a bowl and use your paintbrush. I'm going to just squeeze it. It's easier, quicker. And I'm going to cover the entire surface. I am only going to do one layer because, again, I do want my colors to be bright, but also slightly muted. So I tend to use inexpensive chip brushes for this type of project, and you will see that sometimes the bristles fall out. If you have a situation like this, you're going to want to make sure that you pick those out of your paint before you put the decoupage paper down, because they will cause lumps and bumps, and we for sure don't want that. So make sure you go around and pick all of them out and then smooth the paint back down again. No big deal. You can see the knots are showing through, and that is something that will go away once we seal in the wood and also put an extra layer of paint over top of where each of these knots are. And we're just going to use our hairdryer to dry it, make sure it's completely dry before we go ahead and put on the seal coat that'll seal in all the tannins and, keep the bleed through from the tannins into our decoupage paper. And again, we're using the Polyvine. I'm going to pour it into the cup here so you can see it really is thin. It's like a milk consistency, so it is very, very thin. And I'm just going to put some in the cup here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint the entire surface with a thin layer of the Polyvine. And again, this thin layer is intended to just seal in all the wood and the tannins. So I'm going to make sure I cover the entire surface, and then we're going to dry it. This is not the layer that we're intending to stick our decoupage paper to. So we're going to make sure that it's completely dry, and then we're actually going to go back over with just a little bit of paint on these knots and darker areas, just to make sure that the color of them isn't coming through. The darkness of them isn't showing through our paper, which it will if we don't do this. So I don't need to do the whole board, but I'm just going to do the darker areas. And once we're done with that, we're going to go ahead and dry those. And again, using our hairdryer or a heat gun, but we want to keep it moving at all times so we don't heat up one area too much and cause bubbles. And we'll make sure it's completely dry before we move on. So once we're sure that the entire surface is nice and dry, we're going to want to make sure that our paper, again, is laid out exactly how we want it. So we're going to get out our paper and just lay it out and make sure I have it exactly on this particular round where I want it, right? And the edges are where I want them. Trust me, I speak from experience. This is not a step you want to skip, right? The best way to go about application of a decoupage paper this size, and this is our extra large size, we're going to fold it in half. And I'm going to go ahead and put a thin layer of the Polyvine Heavy Duty Varnish down. And I'm going to wet the paper because we're doing a wet on wet technique. And that works best, I find, for a paper of this size. And once we spritz it and make sure that it's nice and damp, we're going to stretch it down over top of the wet glue. And just gently smooth it down. And I like to do with my hands the smoothing. It just allows me to feel for any wrinkles or bubbles. I like being able to feel the paper. So as we smooth it down, we're looking for those bumps and bubbles. And then we're going to fold down the part that hasn't been glued yet. And we're going to do the same thing. I think I'm actually going to do the top half here in two parts. So I'm going to put the Polyvine down, and then I'm going to spritz the paper. And again, just getting it damp, not soaking wet. And if you do accidentally get it soaking wet, you can lay a paper towel on top, a dry paper towel, and that will help you dry up some of the wetness of the paper. And then the same thing, I'm going to lay it down over top. And this is a very forgiving glue. You're able to lift up, reposition. I really do like this glue. And we're just going to go ahead and smooth that out, again, using my hands. There are other techniques, and I will feature those in other of my tutorial videos here in the Stick It series, but for right now, I'm just using my hands. I really like using my hands on especially a project of this size, because you do end up getting bubbles, and you do want to make sure that those are squeezed off to the side and flattened out. So now I'm going to fold down the last portion. I'm going to put another thin layer of the Polyvine, and then I'm going to spritz again. And just spritzing with our squirt bottle. If you don't have one, use a wet paper towel, lay it over onto the paper, and it will soak into the paper. And then I'm just going to stretch this down over the top again, and I'm just going to smooth. And just feeling for lumps and bumps and wrinkles. And keep in mind, after we apply this last thin coat of our Polyvine Heavy Duty Varnish as a protective seal, we are going to dry this. And when we dry it, we are using heat, right? And the heat will also be shrinking the paper back because the paper is wet. We used a wet on wet technique, and the paper will shrink back, and a lot of those little tiny wrinkles will come out. They'll self-heal. Now I'm going to use this little sanding block, and if you don't have a sanding block, you can just use a little piece of sanding paper, and I'm just going to go around the edge and basically cut the paper. You can use an X-Acto knife if you'd prefer, but this is a nice way to get a very precise edge on your paper. So we're just going to go around the edge and cut away the paper, gently sanding. And if you are just using a piece of sandpaper, you want to use a very high grit because you're not sanding paint off of something, you're just basically cutting the paper. And at this point, we could be completely finished. Or you can make sure you join us back here for part 2 of episode 6 of Stick It. See you next week.